Hey guys, today we are going to take a brief look at the assassination of John F. Kennedy. We'll look at the basic details of that horrible day. We will look at some conspiracies and why some people believe in conspiracies. And then lastly, we'll just take a dive off the deep end a little bit and talk about what some people think would have been different if John F. Kennedy would never have been assassinated in 1963. So let's start at the very beginning. The year is 1963. It's November. We're about 1 year away from an election, and John F. Kennedy and his wife Jackie are campaigning. They're going around the country trying to show the citizens of the United States that they should remain in office. And he chooses to go to Dallas, Texas, for many reasons, but for one reason is that John F. Kennedy needs to carry the Southern votes, the Southern Democrats, if he wants any chance of winning the election in 64. And believe it or not, a rich kid from New England, not incredibly popular in the South. It really helped him in the 1960 election that Lyndon Johnson, his vice president, is from Texas. So that helps. You know, if this kid is cool with Lyndon, then he must be okay. But he really wants to cement that feel in Texas at the time. There's a lot of feelings that are going the wrong direction in the arena of civil rights and other things. So he's got to get down there. He's got to try to sew up this vote for the 1964 election. And that's what brings Jackie and John Kennedy to Dallas on November 22nd, 1963. So on that day, November 22nd, 1963, the Kennedys arrive at Dallas Love Field Airport that morning. They're greeted by lots of people, people that just want to see the president and the first lady. You got to remember, guys, this is 1963. This is a time period that, TV has only really existed for the better part of a decade or just over a decade. And seeing the president like we do on TV all the time was not a thing. You could hear him on the radio, you could see him on TV, but it wasn't as regular as what we see now. So Kennedy, being the popular president that he was and being young and handsome, he drew in large crowds, almost like you would expect, Justin Bieber or One Direction or, those types of fans, reaching out to try to grab him and touch him. So lots of people are going to be following him around this entire day. They take off from Dallas Love Field Airport in the motorcade, presidential motorcade that they are riding in the same car, the Lincoln Continental, with the governor of Texas, Connolly, and his wife. And they're going to make their way towards downtown Dallas. As the motorcade and the president and the first lady and the governor and his wife make their way into Dallas, they are in a convertible. Okay, they're in a car with no top on it. As they come through a main part of Dallas, the area called Dealey Plaza, is when this horrible event is going to happen. There's thousands and thousands of onlookers when a series of 3 shots are going to be fired from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository. Now, they don't know that right at the time, but we'll find out a little bit later. The first shot is a miss. The second shot goes through the back of the president's throat. And the third shot is the one that eventually hits the president in the head. It's a gruesome scene. You can still watch the footage that was caught on tape by Abraham Zapruder. It's called the Zapruder film. It is on YouTube. I'm not going to share that with you. You guys can go check it out on your own. But it is just a horrifying scene. The president is rushed to Parkland Hospital in Dallas, where eventually he will be pronounced dead. Obviously, we know that a lot of things are going to happen later on after the president's death on that day. For example, Vice President Lyndon Johnson will be sworn in as President of the United States on Air Force One. And also, we're going to start to uncover what happened. About 1:20 to 1:30 p.m., the police officers are going to recover a rifle from the sniper's nest, is what we'll call it, on the sixth floor of the Texas School Book Depository. They also will bring into custody the man thought responsible for killing the president of the United States. And that man's name is Lee Harvey Oswald. You have to know that. You have to write that down. Now, who is this assassin? Who is this murderer? Lee Oswald is a interesting story. Um, he was a sharpshooter in the Marine Corps. Um, he is a communist sympathizer. He'd actually defected from the United States and went and lived in the Soviet Union for some time. He was married to a Soviet wife. He moved back to the United States with his wife and their small child. Um, and he's one of those guys that never seemed to fit in anywhere he went. He thought that he'd be better off living in the Soviet Union. When he got there, it didn't really work out for him that well. Just a strange guy. He had attempted an assassination on a general of the United States prior to this. He was definitely probably somebody on the watch list for the FBI um, because of his defection to the Soviet Union. His background does fit the bill of somebody that would do something like this. After Lee Harvey Oswald was brought into custody, um, he was transferred 2 days later. And in the middle of that transfer, Lee Harvey Oswald was gunned down as well. He was assassinated by a nightclub owner named Jack Ruby. Now, this is really where conspiracies and things like that really start to take place because no one understood why a guy like Jack Ruby would do this. Why would some kind of sleazy nightclub owner really feel the need to come into this crowd of people and kill this assassin or this person that conspiracy theorists will later say was somebody that would rat, that would snitch on somebody. But when Jack Ruby was asked about it, he just said that he was so upset. He was so upset that the first lady was going to have to live the rest of her life without her husband, and he was so upset that the people of the United States, as president, was murdered, that he had no other option, that he had to do that. Now, I think you can definitely understand why we're going to start to see conspiracy theories form. This almost seems more like a mob type hit than it does a political assassination. You have a guy that shoots the president who seems like he is going to talk and then is shut up by another gunman. And not somebody that's really a stand-up citizen in the community either. He's kind of sketchy. Now, some other conspiracies that come out of this are people that think there was more than one shooter. They don't believe that Lee Harvey Oswald could have fired all three of those shots in the amount of time that the shots were fired. There's people believe that there was someone called the Umbrella Man, that you could fire a shot out of an umbrella gun. There's people that believe that the mafia, the Chicago mafia, or the mafia in general, were behind this hit, mostly because of the relationship with Cuba. A lot of the mafia was making lots and lots of money in Havana with casinos and stuff like that at the time. And Bobby Kennedy, John's little brother, the attorney general, was going after all of those places and going after the mob. And by getting rid of John, that would maybe throw him off the case. A lot of people believe that Fidel Castro and the Soviet Union and this communist movement were responsible for the death. There's so many things out there that people believe. The idea of the United States government or Lyndon B. Johnson being behind this is also a conspiracy theory. Now, the United States government started an investigation through something called the Warren Commission. The Warren Commission was this investigation to figure out what happened to President Kennedy. And the best explanation they could come up with was something called the single shooter theory, which did prove to their happiness anyway that President Kennedy was shot and killed by one shooter, and that shooter would be Lee Harvey Oswald. I'll share a couple more clips with you guys, kind of some sports science-esque things, simulation that can show why this could and most likely is the best option. But obviously, people aren't always going to believe that. They put it to bed. They said this is what happened, and we're not going to investigate it any further. But still, to this day, people are going to investigate this on their own. Now, why is it so hard for us to believe in the Warren Commission? Why is it so hard for people to do this? And I personally believe, and you'll see this in other documentaries and things like that, I think it's hard for human beings. I think it's hard for normal citizens like me and you to believe that someone as special as John F. Kennedy, to believe that somebody as likable and as popular and as powerful as the President of the United States could simply be killed or assassinated by somebody so unimportant, somebody not known to anyone until this time. It's hard to believe that. It's hard to believe that someone so powerful and so well-liked could just be taken away from us, from somebody so insignificant. And I think it's hard for us to wrap our brains around that, but that's why I think that a lot of these conspiracies still exist. And lastly, we're going to look at, kind of these moments where you put your tinfoil hats on and you kind of wonder and ask these crazy questions about, what would have been, what could have been. And you guys ask me questions like that all the time. In fact, I was just recently laughing about that, talking with my uncle, who was a teacher as well, about, it's hard for us to answer the questions like that because it didn't happen. But lots of times you do wonder about it. And especially from a historian point of view, when you look at John F. Kennedy and you look at his agenda, how would the world be different if John F. Kennedy was never killed? Would Vietnam have gone on until 1975 when he clearly said that he wanted to be pulled out of Vietnam by 65? What would the civil rights movement look like? Would Bobby Kennedy still be alive? Would Martin Luther King Jr. still be alive? The world could be a very, very different place. Okay, and it's fun to think about this alternate timeline, but at the same time, that's not history. That's not what happened. So really the takeaways here, guys, I need you to know the basic information. I need you to know who Kennedy is. I need you to know who Oswald is, who Jack Ruby is. And if you have any other questions, feel more than welcome to email me or comment on Google Classroom. The Kennedy assassination, guys, is going to go down in history as one of those moments that anyone that was alive during the time, or at least old enough to remember, it's going to be one of those moments that they remember where they were, who they were with, how old they were, maybe what clothes they were wearing, or what the room even smelled like at the time. Most generations have these moments. Pearl Harbor, the attack of Pearl Harbor is one. The day that will live in infamy. The assassination of John F. Kennedy. 9/11 for my generation, and lots of people, 9/11 is that. I know that 9/11, I was in my 6th grade classroom with my social studies teacher, Mr. Rusink, and we watched the TV all day. And we had talked about this before in class, and we said, well, what's yours going to be? Like, hopefully you don't have one, because usually they're bad, right? And what's yours going to be? And I know some of us said some of the school shootings and Sandy Hook and stuff like that, but I think that we have our answer now, right? As we're broadcasting this from home, I think that you guys will always remember the COVID-19 pandemic and where you were when you got the news. um, that we weren't going to go to school anymore, and that the world is going to be a very different place. Um, so for this generation in the 60s, the assassination of President Kennedy was one of those things that would stay in their minds very fresh for the rest of their lives. All right, guys, that's it for the most part. Like I said, if you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Um, I hope that you watch it, and I hope that you enjoy the video. Take care and stay safe, and hopefully we see you soon.